tough, but I'm telling you folks, we got a lot to be proud of. We've got a president, we've got a majority in both houses in Congress, we've got governors all over this country who have good sense and good values, and they're smart and they're working hard. What you should want is for the president to be able to succeed in creating jobs in a jobless recovery, to be able to succeed with health care reform, to be able to succeed in making America #1 in access to education again, to be able to succeed in proving that we can create millions and millions and millions of new jobs and not let the Chinese beat us as they think they're going to with the new technologies in solar and wind and carbon capture and electric motors and all that other stuff. That we're still good. People have been betting against this country ever since we started. You ought to read some of the things they said about George Washington. That he was just a second-rate surveyor. That even when he was a young officer, he got beat every time he went into combat. He would never amount to a hill of beans. And when our soldiers crossed the Delaware with feet wrapped in rags and their toes destroyed from frostbite, people were betting against us. And they've been doing it for over 230 years now. And so far, everybody's bet against this country has lost money. And don't you ever forget it. But on the other hand, I'm also reminded of something Winston Churchill said in World War II. You know, World War II started more than 2 years before we got in. And Franklin Roosevelt loved Churchill and knew that he was literally the last bulwark of freedom and did everything he could to help him, legal and a couple of extra legal things he did. But he was trying to help. And the British press knew that Churchill loved Roosevelt, and so they loved to needle him. They had to have something to laugh about. They didn't win any battles for a couple of years. So they needled him constantly about when his buddy Roosevelt was going to join the war. And they needled and needled and needled. And finally one day he looked at the president and he said, you know, the United States always does the right thing after exhausting every other alternative. And I want to tell you folks, we have exhausted every other alternative. And the American people turned to President Obama and turned to Senator Carper and Senator Kaufman, turned to Joe Biden, turned to a Democratic House, because they knew things were broken. Politics is not a pretty process. Mark Twain once said, the only two things no human being should ever have to watch being made are sausage and laws. And I don't expect this to be pretty, but I expect you as Democrats to understand the difference between an ugly process and a pretty product. The American people hire us when they need somebody to stand and deliver. Someone who keeps score by whether people are going to be better off when we quit than when we started, whether our kids have a brighter future, whether things are coming together or being torn apart. I believe we have people who can do that, and I think we have to support them. And when they do that, we need to stand and deliver for them. Thank you, and God bless you all. Thank you.
Please welcome Insurance Commissioner Karen Weldon Stewart.
Good evening. Hola, ¿cómo estás? For some reason, I have the unfortunate task of following President Clinton, and I can tell you, I have no idea what I did to draw the short straw, but evidently I did. Thank you. That was a wonderful speech. I just can't imagine how really great that is. This has been for the Democratic Party of Delaware to have Bill Clinton come and speak to us. I think it's a really great honor, and it shows, I think, how really important the Democratic Party of Delaware is to the country under the leadership of our great chairman, John Daniello, and to the great credit of our governor, Jack Morkel. And I really do think that Jack does show a lot of the same qualities, good qualities, that Clinton showed, because I feel very enthusiastic that Delaware is going in the right direction in this recovery from the recession. I can really feel it, and I can hear it in our governor's voice. And I know he's working very hard and that he cares for every one of us. And for all the state workers and for all the union workers, I know our governor cares. I know we have a short time tonight, but I think tonight and last night for me were two very memorable nights. Last night I got to spend some time with former Senator George McGovern, who ran for president in 1972. He's very old now, and he was very feeble, but I told him I was going to see Bill Clinton tonight, and he said, "Can I write a note for you to give to him?" Which I did give to Bill Clinton earlier tonight. His hand shook, and when he put the date down, he put down September 9th, 9909, and I said, "Mr. McGovern, this is November." He didn't quite understand what I meant by "this is November," but he finally got it, and he tried to change the 9 to an 11. A great man. He was sitting there in the church pew as we were set that night to honor the life of a woman who has changed the course of the history of our country through song. Her name was Mary Travers, and she sang with Peter, Paul, and Mary. A great friend, a great loss. Of all the speakers there that night, which included Whoopi Goldberg, Bill Cosby, so many great people, it was George McGovern who sat there in his church pew writing on little scraps of paper from the hotel he had stayed at, who could barely walk to the stage. He had to be assisted. He stood there and gave the most memorable, most moving, most from the heart speech that I had ever heard and that I had heard for the whole evening. He gave such great words that even today we should think about. He talked about the church that we were in, which was Riverside Church. And he talked about how the former pastor had a radio show many, many decades ago and how wonderful the radio show was. He wished he was still living because it was a lot better than listening to Rush Limbaugh. And we have to admit, Democrats, that there is so much negativity in the air that it hurts all of us, and it hurts the country. It was the great words of Norman Vincent Peale about the positive power of positive thinking that moved us so much, so many decades ago. We must remember that recently we lost 2 elections in Sussex County, not for the lack of great candidates, but because of the great negativity of the Republican Party. McGovern reminded us last night that Senator Kerry was a great hero, a great decorated soldier during the Vietnam War, and yet TV ads portrayed him as lying about this, that this didn't even exist.